おふくかけんは
結界です。
G'day trendsetters, what a great pleasure it is to be here with you again for the second instalment of Everyday Tea and Rice, which is a work by Fukuma Soshin, or Fukuma Shihan as he's known within the Ueda Sokoryu. He has basically the same qualifications as the Grand Master, but not the bloodline. So he's one of the absolute gun Chajin, still alive in Japan today. And he has a big bear heart and wants everyone to do tea. And he's written an ongoing column in our school magazine, which I'm translating, entitled Everyday Tea and Rice. Nichijou Sahanji is the Japanese title. And I'm reading out chunks of the text that I'm translating as well as commenting on it with the idea that it's making tea more accessible to people. So somebody at such a high level is explaining tea in more or less layman's terms to inspire people to take the risk of doing tea for other people more in a more informal setting as part of everyday life, part of your way of operating as a human being to entertain, accommodate people when they come to your house, to facilitate, I guess, more meaningful time together with other people. So today's one is about the flow of a chaji. It changes depending on the season. And then he also goes into the different formats that a chaji or a formal tea gathering can take. In the Hearth season, which we're currently in the Northern Hemisphere, you have the hearth in the middle of the room, which is below the floor. You have like the charcoal in a firebox below the floor, and the kama sits on top of that. The tea kettle sits on top of that, boiling the water. Because it's sort of in more or less in the middle of the room, the heat disperses through the room quite nicely, warming the room, of course, which is very, very inviting in the colder months. So during the Hearth season, we do the charcoal refresh first. These are the 5 big parts of a tea gathering. You have the charcoal refresh first. Then after that, you have the kaiseki meal. So as the kettle is coming to the boil and the warmth is going through the room, you're eating your meal, which is quite nice. Then after that, you have your sweet and go out into the garden for the interval. Then after that, you have koicha or thick tea. Then you have another charcoal refresh. Then you finish with uscha or thin tea, and then that's the end. So the 5 parts are the first charcoal, kaiseki, koicha or thick tea, the second charcoal, and the thin tea at the end. So they're the 5 main parts of a formal chaji. And of course there's the interval in the middle, but I'm not counting that as one of the 5. Then in the Brazier season, which runs from the start of May through until the end of October. So the Hearth season runs from the start of November through to the end of April in the Northern Hemisphere. For the Brazier season, it's from the start of May through to the end of October. And the only thing that changes is the order of the first half of the chaji. So before the interval, you have the charcoal refresh and the kaiseki. That's swapped around in the Brazier season. So you have the kaiseki first, the meal first, light meal, and then you have the charcoal refresh, the first charcoal refresh after the kaiseki, then the sweet, and then the interval. So you've got kaiseki first charcoal refresh, the interval, then thick tea, the second charcoal, and thin tea in the Brazier season. And why it's swapped around is because it's quite uncomfortable in the hotter months to be in the room with a live fire while you're eating. And the Brazier as well is also, rather than being a firebox in the middle of the room with the heat dispersing out through the room, it's in a brazier that raises the fire, a smaller fire, above the ground and puts it over in the corner of the room away from the guests so it doesn't get as hot. As well as that, you do the charcoal refresh after the meal so the fire and the kettle is not boiling away there, making the room hot while the guests are eating their meal. Those are the 2 basic formats of a chaji, depending on the warmer or the cooler months. So the first half of a chaji is called a shoza or a Sho-iri, and this is like the first sitting. And what's included in this part of the chaji is the initial charcoal refresh as well as the kaiseki meal, a light meal. You're only going to be around 50-60% full at the end of a kaiseki meal. The basis of the meal is Ichi-jū San-sai. Ichi-jū means one soup and San-sai means 3 sides. So you have rice as a staple, you have a soup, and then you have the far dish called a mukozuke, which is the first side, and that's to be enjoyed with sake. After you get presented this tray with these 3 things on, you have the sake service, and after that you get the next 2 side dishes, and then after all those 3 side dishes are presented, then you have some pickles that you can clean your dishes with, some hot water or salted water of some description that you clean your dishes with, and then you finish with the sweet. So Ichi-jū San-sai is the basis of the kaiseki meal, and depending on what's going on and the time of the chaji that you're doing, you can abbreviate this, or you can include more dishes, especially as tradition has it, if the guests are fond of sake, you can include more nibbles to enjoy with sake towards the end of the kaiseki meal. But often these days, the kaiseki can be quite elaborate, and Fukuma Soshin, I think he comments in his text that lots of people comment at the end of a chaji that, oh, the food was amazing. But the food shouldn't be the emphasis of a chaji. It's the tea. The food is presented to ensure the guests have sustenance in order to last the length of the gathering, the time that it takes for the kettle to boil, to enjoy the 2 types of tea, the koicha and the usucha. So let me get on to the text, some of the parts that I'd like to read from Fukuma Soshin. He says here, one lovely point he makes here is, the entire structure of a chaji is designed to allow guests to savour a bowl of koicha at its best. The initial charcoal procedure ensures that the fire and kettle are adequately prepared. Then, because tea should not be enjoyed on an empty stomach, a light kaiseki meal is served, not to fill the guests, but to ease their hunger just enough to allow them to appreciate the tea fully. Throughout the year, the chaji adapts to both the seasons and the time of day, morning, afternoon, or evening, each setting offering a different approach to hospitality and enhancing the guest experience. And off he goes to list the different types of chaji, the different types of formal tea gathering. I guess this is more or less shared across all the different schools of tea. I'd be very interested to know if something is not included in here that your school practices, so please tell me in the comments if this is so. But basically, here's the succinct list of the different formats that a chaji can take depending on the season and the time of day. The first one is the classic Midday Chaji, or the Shogo no Chaji. This is the standard form of chaji held throughout the year, regardless of whether it's the sunken hearth in use or the portable brazier. It is considered the archetype of the tea gathering. Guests are invited around noon, and after a full kaiseki lunch, so it's the full Ichi-jū San-sai that I was talking about before, the 1 soup and 3 sides, the tea is served. That's the archetype. Then there can also be a morning chaji and asacha or asa chaji. This happens usually during the height of summer when it's really hot, so you want to do your tea early in the day to beat the heat. This is held during the height of summer, July to August in Japan. So Fukuma Soshin continues. This gathering begins early, with guests arriving between 5 and 6 a.m. After a light breakfast, the event concludes by around 9 a.m, before the full heat of the day sets in. As the saying goes, provide a sense of coolness in the summer. And here's a fantastic segue to say Rikyu's 7 tenets of tea. Make a satisfying bowl of tea, lay the charcoal so that the water boils efficiently, provide a sense of coolness in summer and warmth in winter, which is what Fukuma Soshin was quoting there. Arrange the flowers as though they were in the field. Be ready ahead of time, that's always a challenge. Be prepared in case it should rain, and act with utmost consideration towards your guests. What a beautiful set of 7 principles to abide by when preparing for one of these chaji. In contrast to asacha, you have a yobanashi, or an evening chaji. This happens in the middle of winter, a wintertime gathering typically. And this will occur usually around December or February. So right now it's the season for yobanashi, or at least in the Northern Hemisphere. Don't forget the Southern Hemisphere. So a yobanashi celebrates the long nights of the cold season. Guests are invited around 5 p.m. After a full evening meal, tea is served. The tea room is illuminated with andon lanterns, also tanke lanterns, so there's like an oil lamp with wicks, and also candles. And this creates an ethereal, a very intimate, quiet atmosphere, and due to its delicate ambience and seasonal sensitivity, yobanashi are considered particularly refined and challenging to the host. That's because the host has to operate with naked flame, with the candles and the oil lamps, etc. And doing tea with these, serving kaiseki by candlelight and doing tea, manoeuvring a live flame around the room with the bowl of tea, presenting it to the guests, is quite sophisticated art to master. And so Sen Sotan once remarked, "My practice has come to fruition through the night gathering." So he's alluding there to how difficult it is, and that he really mastered his practice of tea through this candlelight night format of tea. A dawn chaji, Akatsuki no Chaji. This is also held in the depths of winter. It's a very rare gathering. I've never attended one of these. I've only done these by myself. I think to celebrate the first sunrise of the new year or something. I've never actually done it with guests. It's always been something of a personal experiment. But this rare gathering begins in the pre-dawn hours, allowing guests to experience the serene mystery of daybreak. Often referred to as Akatsuki no Chaji, or dawn gathering, guests arrive between 3 and 4 a.m. Imagine if someone rocked up to your house these days at 3 or 4 a.m. in the morning. The neighbours would be thinking, what's going on? Anyway, have a light breakfast followed by tea as they welcome the first light of a new day. So often in traditional daime tea rooms, the wabicha tea rooms, the sukiya, you'll have a skylight and you can open that. Of course, it's bloody freezing, but it's also quite warm already because you're having the hearth going. So to open that skylight at the time of daybreak, the guests are able to see the break of day and the first light of the day. An impromptu chaji, or a Fuji no Chaji. This describes an unplanned tea gathering held when unexpected guests arrive. It emphasises the host's skill in offering authentic hospitality with whatever is available. So whatever you've got in the fridge, you can chuck together and arrange, provide a small meal for the guests to accommodate them, and whatever tea you've got and offer that to your guests is a real test for the host's hospitality. I guess this Fuji no Chaji, or the Impromptu Chaji, this is kind of like an ongoing koan, or a meditation that a tea person can hold within their own practice on how they sort of outwardly greet the world. Like, how do you treat your life? How do you treat your home and your surrounds, and the idea that people may call at your door? If you think in terms of always being ready to do tea for an unexpected guest, the way that you run your life changes dramatically. So the way that you clean your house each morning with the thought that maybe you'll have an unexpected guest for tea this day. To always have your home ready to welcome people, I think is a fantastic way to live your life and structure your life. To always have in the back of your mind that just to have some sweets on standby in case you have an unexpected guest. To always have some tea there ready in case you need to serve somebody. To always have your residence clean so that you may welcome people without thinking in the back of your mind, oh no, it's going to be so embarrassing. Keep your residence in a state where you feel comfortable with allowing people over the threshold to see what's going on in your home, because it's in a beautiful state of cleanliness and order, rather than think when someone calls at your door unexpectedly, oh God, it's going to be so embarrassing when I have to let them inside and they see the unkempt state of my house at the moment. To live your life by this principle, it's actually one of the tea tales. It's around in the 60s somewhere. Rikyu advises another tea person that they should always have a kettle over the fire in case someone calls at the door. And this really structures the way that you run your life as a tea person. To always be ready to welcome people, I think, is a fantastic way to structure your life and to give a quiet guideline in the back of your mind. Always, is my house in a state that I'm able to welcome somebody? Is a beautiful way to live, and something that certainly my tea practice has taught me. Atomi Chaji. This is, ato means after, mi means look. So this is a tea gathering that happens after a tea gathering. So people, I guess this sort of comes through the Fushimi time. So when Hideyoshi built his castle in Fushimi, in the south of Kyoto, he had all his retainers and vassals living around him, and a lot of these people were doing tea, or very, very keen on the idea of Cha-no-yu. You know, Oribe being one, Uedasoka also had a residence around there. All of Hideyoshi's, for about a 10-year period, would live around Fushimi Castle, rotating guard duty. In their off time, they were doing tea for each other, experimenting with the format that tea could take after Rikyu's death in 1591. All these people, there was no sort of like one standout person who was to take over Rikyu's legacy. So all different people experimenting with how tea should look and feel going into the future. It was a great, wonderful time of experimentation. And because people were living in such close proximity, word of mouth would travel and people would know who's doing tea for who and who's showing what particular utensils or what artworks. And so if you got word or caught wind of something's going on, then you would casually rock up to this person's residence around about the time that the gathering would finish to see if you'd be allowed in for this Atomi Chaji, or an after glimpse or an after look. What this Chaji does is it sort of rearranges any leftovers that you have from kaiseki. You take the same dogu and show it, but you might arrange them in a different way. You might use some of the utensils for thick tea that you used in thin tea originally, and vice versa. And you might rearrange the flowers differently or put the vase in a different position in the alcove, etc. I've only ever participated in one Atomi Chaji, which happened in Warsaw with Aaron and Ula, and they rearranged the food, the leftovers in a different way. Also the alcove arrangement was different, and their utensils, they changed between the thick tea and thin tea. It was a wonderful experience. So seldom happens, but it's a thing. And so Fukuma Soshin concludes this list of different formats of Chaji by saying, we've covered the various types of Chaji and their flow. The purpose and motivation behind a Chaji can vary widely according to the host. Rather than grand themes, even simple inspirations like a tree blossoming in the garden or an interesting item found during travel can inspire a delightful Chaji. Next time we will discuss the preparations for a chaji. So this last point, there's many different ways this can take, but just to say at the end of this installment of Everyday in Tea and Rice, that the entire length, or all those 5 parts of a chaji, you can also edit and play around with these, play around with the order depending on how things might look in your culture. So I'm in France at the moment. It's very common for people to come over and have long dinners and talk crap for hours, and it kind of drives me crazy. But the way that I can circumvent this and still make people happy is to incorporate tea into the way that I entertain people. So when people come over for a dinner, we'll have a dinner, but then after the meal has taken place, rather than linger on with dessert and a few more after dinner drinks and all that sort of stuff and talking, I invite people into my tea space. And then we'll either have thick tea or thin tea, or maybe some incense as well, and enjoy the sweet or the dessert in the tea space, then followed by the tea. And often at night time we'll do it by candlelight. Doesn't matter what time of year it is, we can still do it by candlelight. And the course of the gathering can take a deeper, meaningful course in the conversation, and the silence shared is a different way of inhabiting space with other people. And I find that this is a way that I'm able to enjoy hosting people more, rather than just have, a talking shit fest, linger on into the wee hours of the morning. You can structure things a little bit more with these ideas you get from your tea practice to have a very enjoyable and meaningful gathering with people. So I often use the format of chaji and let the existing format of a dinner, inviting people over for dinner, happen, but then migrate into the ideas of a chaji to end the night in a more sort of meaningful, inspiring fashion, rather than talking shit and getting pissed. And also these longer formats of chaji that we're talking about, with these 5 parts of the first charcoal, the kaiseki, thick tea, the second charcoal and the thin tea, can be a bit daunting for people that don't practice the tea ceremony. And of course what Fukumu Soshin is trying to do and inspire people to do is to do tea more. So of course we're going to have to do tea for the uninitiated, so to speak. And you want to make it accessible to people, you want to make it fun so it's not an ordeal. So to abbreviate the structure of a chaji to accommodate your guests and meet them halfway where they are is a very pressing issue. So one of the things that I find is a great way to accommodate guests is, even if you're not going to have a light meal and you just want to invite them over with the intent of doing tea and showing them into your world of the tea gathering and Chana-yu, one of the things that I like to do is incorporate incense into the way that I do tea. This is something that was sort of edited out during Rikyu's time. They found that it was a little bit too long or a bit complicated. I don't know, there's various reasons. And the initial stages of doing incense as part of a tea gathering sort of faded out throughout Rikyu's time, and the standard version of the tea gathering I talked about before, of course, doesn't explicitly include incense, but it is part of our tea practice today, and we do practice different ways of doing incense and incorporating into special gatherings, but I like to bring that out and do incense. Then offer a sweet. Actually, I skipped a format of the chaji. People might have written in the comments already, but a post-meal chaji or a hango no chaji is something I skipped. So Fukumu Shihan says, this type of tea gathering occurs after a meal and can take place in 3 variations: after breakfast around 9 AM, after lunch around 2 PM, or after dinner around 7 PM. Since the meal is already complete, i.e. you've eaten it before you've rocked up to the host's residence, this is sometimes called a sweets and tea gathering. So you'll serve a sweet, but the meal is excluded, so it's a little bit shorter form of a chaji. So this is a great format that you can take reference to when you're structuring your gatherings. So incense, a sweet, thick tea and thin tea is a good way to introduce people into your world of Chana-yu, or maybe just one style of tea. So incense, sweet, and then maybe thin tea for people who's their very first time, or people that you've served tea a few times before. Maybe you can upgrade a little bit and do the incense, sweet and thick tea and see how they go. Then if they're still hungry for more, then you can keep it going and do thin tea. So all these different structures of a chaji with the traditional format are all there ready to be edited and worked according to the needs of your existing culture, your surrounds, the environment that you find yourself in, the guests that you find yourself with, or who you've invited for the particular gathering. They can all be restructured, of course, in consultation with your sensei. But when you're outside of Japan and you're doing tea in different cultures, of course, it's very pressing that you get creative to restructure your gatherings so that you can meet people where they are and get people in to be enthusiastic about tea and not just experience it and feeling like they're forever going to rest on the outside. You want people to feel like they can get involved in this art and culture and embrace it and feel like they're welcome to enjoy tea with you in future gatherings, and it's going to become a thing that continues in the future rather than just a one-off. So rather than just a demonstration looking from the outside, wow, look how amazing we are, it's to tailor the gathering to meet people, to say, no, this is a real thing. This is a culture that doesn't just have to exist as like a museum piece within Japan. This is something that is totally relevant for the culture of all different countries around the world today. It's very pressing at the moment because everybody has a short attention span because of bloody smartphones and all this crap that we're always locked into every day. No, we're putting technology away for the time being and resting in silence and harmony and stillness in this beautiful atmosphere of art, incense and cuisine and poetry and flowers. All these lovely, beautiful, timeless things that we can engage in as part of human culture are things that are extremely relevant today when we're starving for meaning and connection and quiet time. So there you go. There's Everyday Tea and Rice number 2, the format of different chaji and the flow of proceedings. I hope that was instructive. Get creative out there about what that looks like in your own personal practice, and I'll see you again next time. Make tea practice an everyday practice.
おふく加減は
結界です。